When you think of the rebooted WWE version of ECW, the first thought that probably comes to mind is likely something along the lines of what a load of old balls Mahoney that was. WWE cast offs as champions, zombies and other creatures showing up to appease the network, and the continuing burial of ECW legends left a sour taste in the mouths of many, especially those who supported Paul Heyman's little engine that could during its glory days. It wasn't great, granted, but there were one or two exceptional WWECW matches, not counting the one-night stand pay-per-views. I say one or two, or, how about 10 bouts that are extremely, get it, worth your time. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 best WWECW matches. Join us. Number 10, Rob Van Dam vs. The Big Show. Big Show in a ladder match. Bit weird, isn't it? After all, the world's largest athlete is basically a human ladder himself. So why didn't Rob Van Dam just climb up him while trying to retrieve a contract for a future ECW title match? All those pre-bout doobies must have clouded his judgment. Anyway, the match. It was the first time that Big Show had been in a ladder match, while RVD was a seasoned veteran of them. They told a good, simple story, and it wasn't so much about big spots and bumps. Show started off by slowing down his high-flying opponent and delaying the introduction of the ladders, before using one as a giant stick to try and knock down the contract. Since Show eats the entire contents of a piñata as a light snack, that shouldn't have come as much of a surprise. Van Dam gradually fought his way back into it and busted his opponent open, ultimately sending the champ sailing over the top rope with a Hurricane Rana and retrieving the prize suspended above the ring, ending what had been an exciting and unpredictable TV main event. Number 9, the New Breed vs. the ECW Originals. With the ECW champion preoccupied with Vince McMahon, Umaga, and the Battle of the Billionaires saga, the main feud on ECW TV in the spring of 2007 was the ECW Originals, Rob Van Dam, Sabu, the Sandman, and Tommy Dreamer, against the New Breed, Elijah Burke, Marcus Corvon, Kevin Thorne, and Matt Striker. Though they clashed in a hurried bout at WrestleMania 23, the high point of the rivalry came 2 nights later in an Extreme Rules 8-man tag bout. It didn't take long for everything to break down into chaos, with the ring and ringside area getting filled with plunder. After the chairs and trash cans and stop signs had been introduced, there was no slowing down, and the match became a high spot-filled sprint of the best sort. Everyone got a chance to shine and get their signature stuff in, and the action flowed nicely as the crowd responded well to the weapon shots and big bumps, such as Thorne getting put through a table by Van Dam and Sabu jumping off the top rope at the same time. Burke won it for the New Breed after hitting Sabu with a brutal Elijah Express that sent the ECW legend's head through a table. Number 8, Rob Van Dam vs. Test. Test returned to WWE after a 2-year absence and was quickly positioned as one of the top heels on the relaunched ECW brand. One of his first big matches back was an Extreme Rules main event with Rob Van Dam on the October 3rd, 2006 episode of ECW on Sci-Fi, which may have been the Canadians' best ever. It being an Extreme Rules match certainly helped, as it gave even more tools and ways to be creative. RVD always takes advantage of these situations and busted out some great moves and spots here, such as the Rolling Thunder on the outside as Test was lying on the ring stairs. Test got to impress with his power and vicious streak, kicking a chair into his opponent's face, "Now you know how it feels, Rob," before Van Dam responded by chucking some steel back at him. They were out there a long time, around 20 minutes, and gave it everything they had. In the end, RVD fought off Paul Heyman's security team, the Bashan Brothers in case you were wondering, and looked to 5-star Test through a table before Big Show waddled out and sent Van Dam crashing through the wood instead. Number 7, Ric Flair vs. The Big Show. After winning the ECW title from Rob Van Dam in one of the early episodes of ECW on Sci-Fi, Big Show spent much of the summer of 2006 defending the strap against some heavy hitters from other brands such as Batista and The Undertaker. Those matches weren't so well received, but Show's Extreme Rules clash with Ric Flair certainly was. The Nature Boy had rediscovered his hardcore side in 2006, having had a great TLC match with Edge earlier in the year, and he would have a brutal I Quit match with Mick Foley 6 weeks later at SummerSlam too, and he was game for anything here. Given the limited ability of both, this was never destined to be a fast-moving classic, but they made up for a lack of finesse with their willingness to take punishments. It was a hell of a spectacle, with both men getting colour. And that was before the barbed wire and thumbtacks were added to the mix, after which both Flair and Show continued to suffer abuse. The Giant retained with his modified Cobra Clutch, but Slick Rick put in a hell of a showing in defeat and showed that he could still continue to surprise even in his mid-50s. Number 6, Chavo Guerrero vs CM Punk. The feud between CM Punk and a resurgent Chavo Guerrero was one of the early highlights of 2008. They had many tidy traditional in-ring matches during their program, but the one that sticks out in the mind is the Gulf of Mexico match that they had on the February 5th episode of ECW on Sci-Fi. The only way to win it was to throw your opponents in the Gulf of Mexico. Obviously. This was like some sort of Attitude Era throwback, as they said sod this to doing any actual wrestling and instead brawled at ringside, through the crowd, backstage, and ultimately outside the arena. Both men took bumps onto vehicles, and Chavo hurled a fisherman's tackle box at his straight-edge opponent before attempting a suplex into the Gulf. That was countered, and Punk hit a GTS to instead send Chavo into the drink. This was non-title and merely an entertaining bump in the road en route to their championship showdown at No Way Out, but it was a lot of fun, and the different surroundings and way it worked really made it stand out. Number 5, Rob Van Dam vs Sabu. Rob Van Dam and Sabu were two icons of the original ECW and had many epic encounters during their time there. They weren't always the cleanest matches, of course, as both men threw caution to the wind and attempted to innovate and push the envelope rather than string together something that was watertight. Things hadn't changed by the time they met in the relaunched ECW in August 2006. These two were competing in a ladder match to determine the number 1 contender to ECW champion Big Show at SummerSlam. There were some really sick looking bumps here, like Van Dam's head getting jammed in between the rungs of the ladder after taking an Arabian facebuster to the back of the head. There was also some dodgy logic too, like RVD trying to jump from the top rope and grab the contract, missing by about 3 feet obviously, and Sabu trying to use an unstable ladder to execute a triple jump moonsault. As the bout wore on, they continued to up the ante and wreck their bodies before Big Show intervened. He put Van Dam through a table and tried to retrieve the contract himself before Sabu used Show as a human ladder, finally someone, and snatched it to become number 1 contender. Number 4, Kurt Angle vs Sabu. There's an old saying that styles make matches, and the two wrestling styles of Sabu and Kurt Angle couldn't have been more different. The wrestling machine against the suicidal, homicidal, genocidal, death-defying Daredevil, it was an intriguing matchup on paper, and it turned out rather well in execution. Angle started off by controlling things on the mat and dictating the pace, before Sabu took advantage of his opponent's aggression and sent him sailing over the top rope with a backdrop. Sabu hit a beautiful springboard tornado DDT, which I'm sure did wonders for Kurt Angle's papier-mâché neck, but then the Olympic hero took over and started throwing the extremist around at will. From there, the moves flew thick and fast as both men hit their signature stuff and registered some close 2 counts. Sabu was really on his game, making sure that he hit everything crisply, while Angle was his dependable self and held things together nicely. It felt like it was really building to a big finale before RVD and his chair ran in to spoil the party. There was only a very short window for Sabu and Angle to happen, and given that this was Angle's final televised match of his first run in WWE, I'm sure glad that it was booked when it was. Number 3, CM Punk vs John Morrison. The main story on ECW television during the summer of 2007 was CM Punk's pursuit of the ECW title. John Morrison had beaten Punk for the vacant title at Night of Champions before retaining at the Great American Bash and SummerSlam. Their matches on those shows weren't great and a little clunky in places too. Punk has since admitted that they both tried to do far too much in the time that they were allotted, but they definitely had some chemistry. It was just a case of everything falling into place, which it did on the September 4th episode of ECW on Sci-Fi, as the straight-edge superstar had a last chance to capture the gold in the show's main event. On that night, everything clicked and they put on a back and forth banger that had the crowd biting on every near fall. The result was never in doubt to those who actually followed the news, since the Shaman of Sexy was about to serve a 30-day suspension after being implicated in the Signature Pharmacy scandal, but they had the fans in the palm of their hands, and when Punk finally hit the GTS and scored the pin, it was a euphoric moment for an audience that had been supporting him and willing him to the top of the card for the previous year. Number 2, Hardcore Holly vs Rob Van Dam. Since ECW was a brand that really became a place to prepare the next generation of stars for Raw and SmackDown, it made sense to add some experienced veterans to the show, and Hardcore Holly fit the bill perfectly. Finally given the time and opportunity to show just what he could do, Holly surprised a few people by having several great long matches, in particular his series with RVD. The two had several strong bouts together, but the one that everyone remembers is their Extreme Rules match from September 26, 2006. Not only was it a stiff and surly match littered with inventive spots and sequences, but Holly enhanced his reputation as a tough guy by gutting out half of it after getting his back sliced open by a table. The gaping wound caused backstage personnel to order the match to be stopped, but Holly refused and continued on because he knew the match was going so well. It turned out to be one of, if not the strongest match of his career, as his and RVD's styles gelled surprisingly well. Van Dam won the match, but old Sparky Plug won the audience's respect and got a deserved standing ovation for his efforts. Number 1, Kurt Angle vs Rob Van Dam. Before one got suspended and the other released, the rebooted ECW brand was going to be built around Kurt Angle and Rob Van Dam. We got a glimpse at what could have been on one of the first episodes of ECW on Sci-Fi when the two collided in a non-title main event. The two had wrestled each other previously, so were familiar with one another, but the last time they had any sustained interaction was during the Invasion storyline 5 years ago, so the match was certainly fresh. Like with the Sabu match mentioned earlier, this was a case of styles contrasting and complementing well. Van Dam did his stuff, Angle did his stuff, and they built the match beautifully for the almost 18 minutes that they were out there. There were plenty of suplexes, kicks, submission attempts, and moves off the top before RVD won cleanly with the 5-star frog splash. It's Angle, it's Rob Van Dam, it's 18 minutes, and it's really bloody good. Talk about peaking early though, eh?